All right, let's try this again. My computer just totally just crashed. It was a little bit of an overload. So we should be okay now. So, all right, I'm gonna put on a couple minutes of music and you can just chill for a minute and get settled in. Thanks for your patience, you guys. All right. Set the timer. Good old tech difficulties, but the show must go on. Hey Daniel. Hey Nitsan. Awesome, Daniel. All right. We made it. Computer didn't freeze this time. Thank you guys so much for being here and lending your attention for about, it'll be about an hour today. Hopefully about an hour. And yeah, I'm excited. We have a lot to talk about. I'm particularly excited about this episode of Brand Alchemy. So welcome. This is the weekly deep dive into Brand Alchemy, which is the marriage of brand development, creativity, and alchemy. So this is episode 3, and our focus of the day is essence. What is our essence? This is about self-awareness. So the whole Brand Alchemy system, as we went over in the very first masterclass, is basically a 4-phase system or process, and it's actually a cycle. So it starts with the seed, which is all about strategy, and that's we're in there right now. And then once we have our strategy down and our seed, then we go to phase 2, where we start to turn that strategy into things, into an identity, which may be like logo, messaging, these sort of things. And then we move to phase 3, where we go from root to flower. And that's where we, would create something like a website. It's where your work basically takes form, essentially. And then phase 4 is where your work, whatever it is that you do, actually touches the world in an experience, whether it's an event or even just somebody like on your website is an experience. And then once we get through that process, it just keeps cycling back around, and just in the same way that, in the fruit, there's the seed, and round we go. So yesterday's masterclass and today's class are both focused on different parts of the seed. So we'll zoom into the seed here. And as we can see, the seed has 4 components. We've got vision, essence, priorities, and audience. So last week was all about vision. So definitely check out the recording of that, because vision is such a key. It's really it's the seed of the seed. It's where we start. It's where all creative acts start, is with vision. So today's all about essence. So we're going to be zooming in on this quadrant here. And what essence is, so I guess we could back up here and just start by saying that, vision is what gives us clarity about direction, about where we're headed as an individual, as a brand, as an organization, whatever it is that we are. Vision is what gives us direction. So the actual us that's going in that direction is essence, right? It's like the unique thumbprint, so to speak, that makes you or your organization unique. So the key here, it all comes down to this old expression of know thyself, which is I believe Socrates came up with that, which is to say that understanding the self is really, really imperative, and unfortunately we tend to not really know thyself. So self-discovery, the process of self-discovery is a process of becoming better, knowing thyself. So if that's this is kind of the old school way of saying it. There's a newer way of saying it that I really like by Gary Vaynerchuk, and he says, I had a little typo there. Let's fix that. Once you start understanding yourself, once you start executing on who you actually are versus who you wish you were, things start to change very quickly. So I don't know if you are familiar with Gary Vee. I'm sure a lot of you are. He's kind of like the Michael Jordan of marketing, and he's got a really popular personal brand and runs a big advertising and marketing agency. But he's really big on this idea of self-awareness, that a lot of times, especially when getting into business and kind of playing the entrepreneurial game, there's a lot of copycat action going on, and a lot of people kind of trying to fit themselves into situations that they really don't belong in to begin with, or it's just not really their natural DNA. So he's all about, discover what's your natural DNA, what's your unique sort of twist on things, and what are you actually interested and not interested in. And so what Gary Vee is saying here in this quote is that and I'm going to read it again. Once you start understanding yourself, once you start executing on who you actually are versus who you wish you were, things start to change very quickly. So once we understand who we actually are and what comes naturally to us and what our strengths and our weaknesses are, then we can start acting on that. And what he's saying is that when we do that, then things start flowing, things start changing. So the key here with self-awareness is just being on. It's just self-honesty is really what it comes down to. It's about being honest with ourselves about what we're actually interested in and what actually brings us joy, right? What do we actually enjoy doing? Not what do we think we need to do, right? Which is what he's talking about with, versus, who we wish we were or think we need to be, but who are you actually right now? What do you actually enjoy and like? Same thing with values, what are your values, right? What sort of things can you get behind and what sort of things can you not get behind? Another key thing is beliefs, right? Understanding our beliefs, whether they're negative beliefs that hold us back or positive beliefs that give us leverage. Understanding what our beliefs are is really key, because if we don't understand what our beliefs are, then, changing those beliefs is going to be pretty much impossible. On the same note is like, what are you good at? What are your skills, right? And talents. And ultimately, it's just, again, self-honesty. Just keep it real, right? I believe that we were taught to be everything except ourselves, to try to be, anything but me, right? And so everybody's kind of like playing the roles of other people in this kind of funny way, in my eyes. So this process can help us get in touch with who we actually are and what actually motivates us as artists or individuals or organizations. So how do we figure all this stuff out? Well, a good way to start is using the Brand Alchemy seed strategy process. So again, this is the full seed. We're just going to focus in on the essence today. Now, essence in this framework has two parts. It's broken up into archetypes and attributes, and we're going to be diving really, really deep into both of those today. If you guys have any questions that come up during this presentation, just ask, and then I'll get to them at the end. So this is a quote by Carl Jung, who's a very famous psychologist. And he actually I believe he came up with the idea of archetypes, or at least he popularized them. So this is what Carl Jung says about archetypes. The contents of the collective unconscious are archetypes, primordial images that reflect basic patterns that are common to us all, and which have existed universally since the dawn of time. Well, that's a pretty powerful statement. So what he's saying is, this idea of archetypes are these sort of images or patterns that speak to these sort of internal psychological patterns that we all have. There's a consistency there. So what he's saying is that we can use archetypes to better understand our psychology, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. So what is an archetype, right? What exactly is an archetype? I've come to understand that an archetype is it has to do with mythology, but more specifically, an archetype is a role or a character, so to speak. It's a role that we assume in this sort of cosmic play that we're all playing. So it's a mask that we put on. And it's a pattern of consciousness, right? It's kind of like, in all of the complexity of what it is to be human, especially just within our heads and within our psychology, something that's so complex, when we break it down into these archetypes, we can understand the sort of simplistic framework behind it, underlying it, that enables it to create so much complexity. And when we start to understand these basic patterns and archetypes, then the complexity of the mind begins to get demystified and becomes a lot more simple. So from a branding perspective, this system can help us get clear on who we are, and it can also help us get clear on who our audience is and who we're serving, and understanding them on a really deep level, which is a very, very important thing. So this whole idea of archetypes it's already in use as a branding thing. There's something that's been developed called brand archetypes, and it's directly based on Carl Jung's archetypes system. So he actually came up with 12 archetypes. The ones he came up with are slightly different than what you see here, but these are actually based on on Carl Jung's archetypes. And this system has been kind of created particularly for brand development. And like I said, some of these archetypes are a little bit different, and I don't want to go too deep into them right now, but I do want to just show you how some brands map to this. So we'll just start with the Outlaw here on the top kind of 1 o'clock position. So a good example of the Outlaw is Virgin, or even Harley Davidson, right? Magician, right? Disney, or even the heroes. A good example is Nike, right? If you think about the Nike persona and like what it stands for, it's all about heroism and just kind of like, you put on a pair of shoes and you become a hero, right? So this will actually make a lot more sense in a bit. So essentially what this does, and the reason that people actually even use these archetypes in a branding context, is that they realize that what they are is they're sort of repositories of meaning, or it's a way of managing meaning, right? It's a way of filing away complexity and meaning. And basically it's a simple framework that allows you to create a brand that has a distinct character and personality. And it is inherently mythological. So by utilizing archetypes in branding, we can bring a sort of more mythic quality to the brand. You think about Nike. Nike has kind of become something it's kind of mythic in the scope of what Nike is and what it represents. So here's another great quote by Carl Jung, and this is actually him talking about how his archetype system is actually based on astrology, believe it or not. So these 12 archetypes are really based on the 12 zodiac. So the collective unconscious appears to consist of mythological motifs or primordial images, for which reason the myths of all nations are its real exponents. In fact, the whole of mythology could be taken as a sort of projection of the collective unconscious. We can see this most clearly if we look at the heavenly constellations, whose originally chaotic forms are organized through the projection of images. This explains the influence of the stars as asserted by astrologers. These influences are nothing but unconscious, introspective perceptions of the collective unconscious. So what he's saying here is that this idea of the zodiac and archetypes are basically the same thing, and that what they're referring to are these really basic patterns of consciousness and ways of being that are universal to everybody, at least in his view. So this was really interesting to me, and just I'm not really big into astrology necessarily, but I find it interesting, especially from this lens. So I thought to myself, why, if these archetypes are based on astrology, why not just use the zodiac as the basic kind of framework rather than this newer system? I mean, the zodiac's been around forever, right? So here's the zodiac system. Looks familiar, huh? Just like that, right? So again, they're basically the same thing. So for Brand Alchemy, what I started doing was I started mapping and figuring out exactly what archetypes correspond to which of these zodiacs. And believe it, I mean, as I'm going to show you here in a bit, it's totally the same thing. So the thing about astrology is that really it's just a system of psychology. It's an ancient system of psychology, right? It's using the stars or the heavens as a sort of metaphor or a way of looking into the self, right? It's an introspective thing. Also, I don't really believe so much that its true value is in like fortune telling or, that kind of stuff. Its true value is really in psychology, right? Understanding the self, knowing thyself. And that's what astrology is for. It's just a tool to help us better understand ourselves and the world around us. And yeah, again, this is a thousands of year old system of human psychology. So to just dismiss it as being some old bogus hocus pocus nonsense is kind of silly to me. This is a clock in Prague that is a astronomical clock. Super, super interesting. It's basically a zodiacal clock. But again, this has been around forever. So in the same way that alchemy became what is modern day chemistry, alchemy actually birthed chemistry. Pretty much all the chemistry like apparatus and a lot of the techniques like distillation apparatus and all that kind of stuff were actually invented by alchemists, which, in the history books are these old superstitious dudes that were trying to like get rich turning lead into gold. But that wasn't actually what was going on. So in that same way, astrology became modern day astronomy. To me, the difference between astrology and astronomy and the difference between alchemy and chemistry is that alchemy is an inward pursuit. It is a pursuit of self-mastery, whereas chemistry is a pursuit of the external world, right? Which ultimately, brings its own set of findings and stuff, but it gets away from self-discovery. Same thing here is that, rather than using the stars as a means to understand ourselves as humans, we're using the stars as a means to just go further and explore further. But I think that the unfortunate reality is that has kind of, modern science has kind of brought us away from our nature as, soulful humans. But anyways, whatever the case, whether we're talking about alchemy or astrology and all these, kind of occult things, really they're just tools. They're tools to understand the self. That's it. And for me, it doesn't really matter. It's like, it doesn't matter if I believe in it or not. I don't need to believe in astrology or believe that my, my birth chart like dictates my life. That doesn't really matter to me. For me, what's interesting is that these archetypes are actually really useful, especially in a creative or branding context. So again, Carl Jung says, astrology, like the collective unconscious with which psychology is concerned, consists of symbolic configurations. The planets are the gods, symbols of the powers of the unconscious. So again, he's just saying, this is all a symbolic way of understanding the self. It's not necessary to be taken literally. So again, here's the Brand Alchemy system. Not Brand Alchemy, the Brand Archetypes system that I forget the woman that came up with this. I forget her name right now. But this is actually a very popular system in the branding world. It's used a lot. So for me, I was like, well, all right, let's just get back to the roots and use the more just use the zodiac as the core, and then kind of go from there. And so this is what I came up with. So what we got here is a sort of similar wheel, and basically on this outer ring of these rainbow colors are the glyphs of each of the zodiacal signs. And then the words here on the outer edge are the sub-archetypes, or the archetypes within that sign, so to speak. So for instance, if we look at this map and we look at, I don't mean, just pick any one of these, like the Explorer, freedom, right? The Explorer wants freedom. So we go over here, and then the Explorer became Sagittarius, which is this little bit here. But not only is it the Explorer, you know, Sagittarius is a bit more complex than just an Explorer. Sagittarius is the Explorer, but it's also the philosopher or the visionary. Same thing with, why don't we look at the creator, for instance. So then the creator becomes Pisces right here, which is the artist, dreamer, inventor. So some of these terms like creator, sage, magician, hero carried through, and then in some cases I changed it. So anyways, this system, which is the Brand Alchemy archetype system, which is what we will be moving forward with. So a lot of these glyphs aren't going to really make much sense, and you don't really need to pay attention to them. They're just extra little layers of meaning, right? Because again, remember, this whole brand archetype system, it's really its main function is just a way to manage meaning, right? So here's the signs. And each one of these signs has within it its own set of meaning. You know, each one of these is a different role, so to speak, or a different mask. In astrology, the planets are kind of like the actors, right? And then they put on these different masks, and that kind of is, plays out in different ways. The main thing we're going to be focusing on here today is these signs, but I just want to show you these other elements just so you understand what's going on here. So these modes are kind of like the actions that take place, how they act, right? So for instance, like if the planets are the actors and the signs are the roles that they play, then the modes are kind of like the, what they're actually doing on stage and how they're moving and interacting. So we'll be doing deeper dives into this at a later time, but I just want to give you the sort of bird's eye view of all of this. So put it all together. There we go. So let's dig in to each of these archetypes. And just kind of a little bit of foreshadowing. The goal here is for our brand, we want to identify what archetype is the most resonant. And what that can do, if we identify something that works, then what that's going to do is that each archetype comes with it a set of values, a set of just a kind of whole like file of meaning to draw on. And you'll see that in just a second. So let's look at all the archetypes. So starting with Aries, which is the ram. All right, let's look at Aries. So Aries, the archetypes of Aries are the hero, the warrior, the champion. So Aries, or an Aries-based brand, what it helps people do is to act courageously. That's what Aries does. Its strength is courage. Its weakness is hubris, which is kind of like arrogance, basically. And the core desire here is to prove one's worth through courageous and difficult action. The mantra is, where there's a will, there's a way. So it's really about exerting willpower. And, you think about Nike, right? It's a perfect example. So the goal with Aries is to exert mastery in a way that improves the world. And the Aries strategy is to become as strong, competent, and powerful as you are capable of being. So again, brands, Nike, Adidas, FedEx. This is like the archetype of achievement, right? It's about like winning and being like, at the top of your game and exerting willpower. So like athletic types of brands or like, anything that has to do with like working out could work really, really well with an Aries archetype base. So back to this. So we're starting, Aries is here at the about 10 o'clock position, and then we're going to be working around clockwise. So next up, we've got Taurus, which is the bull. So Taurus is the archetypes of Taurus is the Epicurean, the sensualist, and the lover. So an Epicurean, I really like this word. It's basically just like something that's like Epicurean. It's like somebody that just really loves sense pleasures, like good food, good food, good music, good environment. That's Epicurean. So what a Taurus or an Epicurean does is to help people experience pleasure. The strength is community, but the weakness is conflict avoidance. Core desire is to experience sense pleasure and attain intimacy. The mantra is life is a garden of delight. And the goal with Taurus is to being in relationship with the people, work, experiences, and environment they love. And the primary strategy for Taurus is to become more attractive physically, emotionally, and mentally. So some brand examples here of Taurus brands is like Olive Garden, Hallmark, or even Victoria's Secret, which are, they're all about sense pleasures and bringing people together and sharing an intimacy or love, whether it's, sexy love like Victoria's Secret or just like family love, like getting together at the Olive Garden. So that's Taurus. So now we move up another notch up here to Messenger, Source, and Sage, which is Gemini, which is the twins. And again, the reason that I chose to use the astrology as the archetypal basis is because there's so much depth and meaning, and there's just so much to draw from, right? It's the mythology of each of these archetypes has so many layers of meaning that can be directly drawn from for branding purposes. And I'll be showing you exactly like how to apply all that stuff in a later lesson. So Gemini, archetypes are the sage, the messenger, and the source, right? So this is really about knowledge and information, right? And what Gemini does is it helps people understand their world. The strength is analysis and planning, and weakness is slow to act. The core desire is discovery of truth, and the mantra is the truth will set you free. The goal is to use intelligence and analysis to understand the world, and the strategy is to seek out information and knowledge and become self-reflective. So brand examples is BBC, Harvard, TED. Also, Google is a really, really, really good example of this as well. So these are brands that are about the dissemination of knowledge, basically, and the discovery of truth. On that note, actually, the New York Times is another good example of a Gemini brand, and they've been having this campaign, this like advertising campaign for a while now, and the whole campaign is based around this concept of the truth is worth it, and it's just amazing to me how aligned like everything that they're putting out within this specific campaign is like totally, it's all right here. So next up we've got Cancer, which is the crab. So this is the nurturer, the mother, and the protector. And it's interesting that we can see, just the symbology of a crab, right? It has a protective shell, right? So what the nurturer, the mother and protector does is to serve others. It helps people serve others. The strength is service, and the weakness is needing accountability or requiring accountability. Core desire is to protect others from harm. And the mantra is to love your neighbor as yourself. So again, goal is to help others, and the strategy is to do things for others. And brands are Tom's, WWF, UNICEF. So Tom's is just a perfect example of a Cancer brand, because like if you think about their whole marketing shtick is basically like I think they say 1 for 1, right? So every pair of shoes you buy from them, you are also buying a pair of shoes for like some kid in a third world country or something, right? So they've basically woven into their brand and into their whole strategy that like that they're being helpful to, you know, and serving others by creating this whole brand that like has this model, but the way that they position it and the way that they communicate it is that you're the one that's helping that little kid out, because Tom's not donating. They're not like donating because you bought. They're kind of saying that like for this pair of shoes, you know, half of the money is going to buying the pair of shoes and the other half is buying the pair of shoes for the kid. So they're really putting it in your hands and letting you have that experience of getting to be the one that served that person. And that's why their brand is just taken off, right? So next up, we got Leo here, the entertainer, the jester, and the king. So this is the lion. So if you think about just like lion, you know, the way a lion is very kingly and like, you know, royal and regal, right? And the king that we're talking about here is not like a ruler king so much as like a showman king, right? It's like the part of the king that brings everybody together and is very jovial and kind of the center of attention, which is why we've grouped entertainer, jester, and king all together here for Leo, because what Leo does and what all of these archetypes do is to help people have a good time. The strength is playfulness and the weakness is accountability, and the core desire is to live in the moment with full enjoyment. So mantra is really good. If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. The goal is to have a great time and lighten up the world, and the strategy is to play, make jokes, and be funny. So brand examples are like Dollar Shave Club is such a perfect example. I'm sure you guys have seen the commercials for that. It's just hilarious. It's just really fun and it's just fun and funny. Old Spice and MailChimp. All of these brands just have a very, very playful kind of happy-go-lucky personality, and it works really well. So as we're going through these, I want you to like pay attention and feel into like what ones resonate with you, right? What ones are like, wow, that feels like me, or you know, maybe, or I would like, you know, maybe you want to be more like something, like you see one of these and there's an impulse that you're like, I want to embody more of that. Just kind of take note of that. So next up is Virgo, which is the Virgin. So archetypes are the purist, the analyst, and the innocent. So what Virgo does is to help people restore purity. And the strength is security, weakness is dependence. Core desire is to experience paradise, right? The sort of impulse or desire of Virgos is for everything to be perfect, which is why we have the purist there. So the mantra is free to be you and me. And the goal is just to be happy, just to be okay. And the strategy is to do things right, doing the right thing. So good examples of brands are like Ivory, Dove, or Dr. Bronner's, which is really, I mean, all these are like soap companies. But, you know, it speaks to this idea of like purity and cleanliness. And so they've really embodied this purist virgin's archetype, and it works well. All right, next up, we've got Libra, which is the scales balance. So Libra is the diplomat, the harmonizer, the peacemaker, right? Bringing things back into balance if they get out of balance. Helps people find acceptance. And the strength is inclusion. And the weakness is vanity. And the core desire is connection with others. So the Libra's mantra is all men and women are created equal. So there's a really big theme about equality and togetherness and kind of leveling the playing field. So the goal is to belong and find your place. And strategy is develop virtues and create a sense of belonging. Brands, a few examples are like Wendy's, IKEA, Target, Coca-Cola. All right. Continue on. So next up, we've got we have Scorpio. Scorpio is the alchemist, the magician, the shaman. So this is actually my primary brand archetype that I'm using for my brand. I'm sure you can see how this is already showing up, right? So the alchemist, the magician, the shaman. So what Scorpio does, or what any of these archetypes do, is they help people affect transformation, whether it's in themselves or in the world around them. The strength is weakness, the strength is vision, and the weakness is connecting with ordinary people. And the core desire is the knowledge of the laws of how the universe works. The mantra with this archetype is anything is possible. The goal is to make dreams come true. And the strategy is develop vision and live it. So a couple examples of Scorpio or magician brands are Disney and Pixar. So it's this whole idea of kind of like making dreams come true. Anything is possible, which I believe. All right, next up is Sagittarius. This is the explorer, the philosopher, the seeker. So what Sagittarius does is helps people live new experiences. The strength is autonomy, and the weakness is a lack of coordination. Core desire is self-discovery through exploration. So there's this essence of there's this endless quest with this archetype, and the mantra, don't fence me in, right? It's like constantly looking, constantly going to the edges of its known world, and it wants to be kind of out in the middle of nowhere by itself, right? On a vision quest. So the goal with Sagittarius is a better, more authentic and fulfilling life. And the strategy for this brand archetype is to journey, to seek out new experiences and escape from entrapment and boredom. So a couple brand examples are Jeep, Patagonia, the North Face, and REI. I mean, these are very typical sort of examples because they're all kind of like outdoorsy, explorative brands. But again, I mean, you can just see it really works perfectly. Now, whether these brands are consciously embodying these archetypes or not, it doesn't really matter. Because all that matters is that we can see how these archetypes are showing up, right? Because again, the idea here is that they're all, each of these archetypes are present in human consciousness, right? So of course we would start to see them everywhere. And what I've been noticing is, as I'm getting to know this system more and more, I am seeing it everywhere. It's almost to a point where I can look at any brand and kind of be like, oh, here's, it's these archetypes. Okay, so next up, we've got 3 more. Okay, so this is Capricorn, the goat, the mountain goat, really. So the mountain goat is all about climbing to the top, right? So this is the executive, the master, and the ruler, right? It's the big boss. It helps people exert control, to have and take control, right? Not necessarily a bad or good thing. It's just being in control. So the strength here is structure, and weakness is flexibility. And Capricorn's core desire is mastery and control. Mantra, power isn't everything, it's the only thing. And the goal is to create a prosperous, successful family, company, or community. And the strategy is to exert leadership, right? Because again, the Capricorn it's the symbol of the ruler or the leader, the person that holds it all together. The executive, right? Brands, Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, Louis Vuitton, anything that's kind of, when you think about like brands that are for executives, right? It's going to be a Capricorn brand. All right. So now we've got this, the rebel, liberator, and revolutionary. So this is Aquarius. And it's maybe not super obvious what this is, but there's like a shell here, and then there's water coming out of it. So the symbol of Aquarius is actually these little waves. archetypes of Aquarius are the rebel, the liberator, and the revolutionary. So what this archetype does is it helps people inspire change. And the strength is divergent thinking, and the weakness is ethics. Core desire is revolution. The mantra is rules are meant to be broken. And the goal is to change what is not working. Strategy is disrupt, change, shock, and destroy. And the brands that are Aquarius brands that we're all familiar with are Virgin, Harley Davidson, Vice, and Diesel. So Harley Davidson is such a perfect example of a kind of rebel brand. And actually in the other Brand Alchemy system, they call it the outlaw, which is definitely resonant with Harley Davidson. And so if you think about what Harley Davidson is doing, right, they've built their brand around this archetype of the rebel or the outlaw, which is based on Aquarius. And if you think about like the type of people that basically the primary audience, the majority of the audience of Harley Davidson are not like big scary biker dudes. They're actually like people that, you know, work a desk job on the weeks, and then, you know, every Sunday they put on their chaps and get on their bike and basically like put on this rebel mask for a day, and they get to, you know, live out this fantasy of being this revolutionary type of person, you know, that's you know, very outlawish. So it's in a way it's helping the audience, you know, embody this mythic quality into, you know, it gives them more meaning. Okay. Last one is Pisces. This is the fishes. So this is the creator, the artist, and the inventor. So what this archetype or set of archetypes does is it helps people create the future, right? Strength is innovation, and the weakness is routine. And then the core desire is to create something of enduring value. So the mantra for Pisces, if it can be imagined, it can be created. The goal is to give form to a vision. So there's actually I noticed there's a lot of similarities between this and Scorpio, which is the magician, right? Because the magician's about making dreams come true, and this is about giving form to a vision, which are kind of the same thing. But Scorpio's focus is more on transformation, and Pisces is more about just creating something new. So there is a difference there. So the strategy for Pisces is to develop artistic control and skill. So brands, think about Apple, Adobe, Lego. You know, these are brands that empower you to be a creator, right? In the same way that Harley Davidson gives, you know, empowers their audience to become the outlaw for, you know, for however long they want, you know, just by association. You know, Apple enables you to become the artist, the inventor, the creator, you know, by the computer, and, you know, and then you're part of that creator club, so to speak. So that's the whole system, right? Now, so the key here is that we want to explore and figure out which we can start by picking a zodiacal sign, but then what we want to do is we want to like narrow in and pick one of the sub-archetypes, because each of these sub-archetypes are like different expressions of this base archetype of whatever the zodiac sign is, right? But we can get more specific, right? Because there is a difference between an artist and an inventor, right? There is a difference between an alchemist and a shaman, right? There is a difference between the king and the jester, right? But they all are kind of doing the same thing. They're just doing it in slightly different ways. So what we do is we figure out what's our primary and then what's our secondary. Sometimes you know, if you only use as many as you need, really. I mean, ideally, if you could just pick one and go with that, it's going to give you more focus. But sometimes it's good to have a secondary just to kind of give it a little extra something to work with. So for instance, my personal archetypes that I have chosen are the alchemist, the explorer, and the revolutionary. And actually, you know what? I'm going to change this to the philosopher. Because I feel like the type of exploration that I've been doing more and more these days is less about like physical outwards exploration and more about philosophical internal exploration. And as we see, right, philosopher is one of the sub-archetypes of Sagittarius. So really this is what I've chosen is Scorpio is the main, Sagittarius and Aquarius is the secondary. And then then the sub-archetypes that I picked out of those is alchemist, philosopher, revolutionary, right? Interestingly enough, you might naturally be more drawn to, the signs that are associated with your birth chart. I didn't even intend for this to happen, but like my moon sign is Scorpio, my sun sign is Sagittarius, and my rising sign is Aquarius. Take that for what it's worth, or what you will, but it's just kind of interesting that I just naturally gravitated to these. But again, the key thing here too is like, you don't need to think of it in terms of a Scorpio, Sagittarius, Aquarius. It's not like you need to be like, oh yeah, I have a Scorpio brand. I think there's more value in actually getting clear on what the sub-archetype is, because then it gives it more of something tangible to work with, something that we more easily understand. Okay. So here's a quote by Carl Jung that I want to share, just to end this first half focus of brand archetypes, and then we're going to move into brand attributes. The starry vaults of heaven is in truth the open book of cosmic projection, in which are reflected the mythologems, and I don't even know what that means, but i.e. the archetypes. Oh, okay, there it is. So the mythologems are the archetypes. So the starry vault of heaven is in truth the open book of cosmic projection, in which are reflected the mythologems, or otherwise known as the archetypes. In this vision, astrology and alchemy, the two classical functionaries of the psychology of the collective unconscious, join hands. So yeah, there's some real powerful stuff here if you choose to put it to practice. And so what I would recommend you do is figure out your primary and your secondaries. You'll be able to watch the recording of this and go through it all. And I'm also going to be creating like article versions and more resources to help you use this system. So yeah, figure out your primary and then your secondaries. All right, moving on to attributes. So what are attributes? So basically, in essence, what brand attributes are, they're just words, right? They're just simple words that say a lot with a little, right? When I start a client project for like, say, a brand or website, we always start with this whole seed process and figure out the attributes, figure out the archetypes and all these things. So with the archetypes, what we're doing is basically figuring out the seed root words that give the brand character and personality. And we're going to get into what that actually looks like here in a second. But before we do that, I want to share this quote, which I've shared quite a bit, but it's quite relevant here now. So the true alchemists do not change lead into gold. They change the world into words. So that's literally what we're doing with the attributes, is that we're taking something like our brand or our craft or art or whatever it might be, and we're breaking it down into simple words, right? We're taking this big idea and breaking it down into words. So we've got 6 kind of categories of attributes that we look at and that we identify and clarify. So we start with culture, right? So the question is like, what is your culture? What is the greater cultural context of like what you do, right? Or is it music culture? It doesn't need to be like, Hawaiian culture or like a culture in the sense of a location, even though that is culture, but it could also be like, creator culture, art culture, dance culture, transformational culture, right? These sort of things. So what is the greater cultural context of what you do, right? And where it's being done. next is audience, which is similar to culture, but it's more specific. It's almost like out of your culture, you know, because culture is a big thing. So out of the bigger culture, who is specifically the people that are really going to be paying attention to you or are paying attention to you? You know, who are your audience? Audience literally is related to audio, right? So audio is like a sound. It's making sound or, you know, come out, right? An audience is those who are listening to that sound, okay? So audience literally means you know, those who listen, or it's just the act of listening, really. So we've got culture and we've got audience. Next we have voice, right? What do I sound like? Like, what is my unique voice? And I don't mean like what I sound like am I nasally, but like, what do I sound like? Am I confident? Am I joyful? Am I humorous? You know what I mean? Like these sort of things. And that's an attribute, right? Humorous is an attribute. There's just like a single word or a phrase that has an idea, right? So the next thing we do is feeling, right? So how do you make other people feel after an interaction, right? How do other people feel after using your product or, you know, experiencing your art or looking at your website or reading your post? You know, anytime somebody has an interaction, like what sort of feelings do you invoke in them, or what sort of feelings do you want to invoke in them? We are emotional beings. We're motivated by emotion, right? Our purchasing decisions are emotional more than they're logical, right? Like we're not rational beings, we're emotional beings. And that's why feeling is a really important one of our attributes. So the next attribute is impact, right? Like what is the tangible impact that you have on people, right? On your audience? Like what do you do for them? Why are they listening? Why do they care? Why are you important to them, right? Like what tangible thing, in what way are you making their life better or different, right? And then lastly is the X factor, which is to say, you know, what is your unique spin on things? What do you have that like other people don't have, or what do you have that's like really hard to copy or imitate, right? It's kind of like, what's your secret sauce? You know, what makes you really, really unique and kind of like in a whole category of your own, okay? So again, we've got culture, audience, voice, feeling or emotion, impact, and X factor. So in order to figure all this stuff out, I have a process that I use that allows us to basically figure out all these attributes in a matter of like an hour. And it's a super fun process. So the way that we do it is we just create 6 columns like this. You can do it with, I do it in Keynote, like right here in Keynote, because I can just write right in it. And it's just really easy with clients too, because I can just like share my screen in a client call and we'll just work it out together. But you could just like, it's really fun too to just get a big piece of paper and do it that way. I recommend doing this exercise with a friend or with somebody else that knows you or doesn't know you, but getting that outside reflection is super duper helpful because oftentimes we are kind of like blinded to our own talents and gifts, right? So a lot of times it's really, really valuable if somebody can help reflect and help us with this process. So again, this whole thing really only needs to take an hour. And the amount of clarity that you can get out of this is just incredible. And I'll show you exactly what that could look like. So here's how you do it. It's super simple. Get out, you make your thing, you make your columns, and then you get out a timer. And then you're going to set the timer for 3 minutes. Okay. Then what you do is in 3 minutes, you go to this first column for culture and write down as many ideas as you can in that 3 minutes. Just good ideas, bad ideas, silly ideas, terrible ideas. It doesn't matter. Just write down ideas. And you really, the first, 5 or 6 will be super easy. And then usually you'll get to a point where you kind of have to start digging and pushing. And usually that digging is where you actually unearth the gems. So push through it and just like, yeah. So I'm going to show you, this is I did this process for myself with a group about a couple months ago. So I'm going to use myself as the example. So 3 minutes, create as many as you can. You're going. You want to aim for at least 10. Okay, 10 to 15 is good. And then once 3 minutes is up, you just stop and you move on. Set the 3 minutes again, but then go to column 2. And then, boom, we have a column 2. So with column 1, we are answering what kind of culture do you want to create? So I chose my culture is creator culture, artist culture, music, soulful, innovative, visionary, transformative, spiritual, dance, healing, deep work. That's the greater cultural context of like the world that I exist in and want to exist in and want to serve, right? My audience, who is my ideal audience or community, right? And I want to say too, we don't need to necessarily be stuck on like the current reality. This is more about visioning into like, what kind of people do I want to be working more with? It's also really important in this process that you spin things in the positive, right? So if you're like a coach and a lot of your audience are like, stuck, for instance, like they're just feeling stuck in whatever, they're blocked. So instead of saying blocked or stuck, you would say liberated, right? It's kind of like paint them into the type of person that's going to help them become who they want to become, if that makes sense. So my audience, or ways I've described them, is conscious or powerful creators, intelligent, creative, courageous, artful, entrepreneurial, devoted, artisan, caring, entrepreneurial, collaborative, visionary, doers, builders, right? Creators. So again, keep doing that process, 3 minutes per column. So we have voice. So here's what I chose for voice. Soulful, philosophical, open-minded, intelligent, timeless, poetic, calm, deep, encouraging, confident, professional, kind, clear, fun, precise, thoughtful, and introspective. Feeling, how do I make others feel? Or how do I want others to feel after interacting? How do I want you to feel after this interaction, after this live stream? I want you to feel empowered. I want you to feel actualized, inspired, confident, heard, optimistic, calm, encouraged, safe, connected, grounded, open-minded, purposeful, liberated, enlightened, worthy. And again, the key here is like, don't get stuck on perfection. This is like a first pass of just like a brain dump, right? So tangible impact that I have, or that I would like to create on others, is transformation, personal growth, possibility, reaching potential, actualization, unlocked potential, dream life, or being able living your dream life, flow states, lifestyle design, powerful community, facility, breakthrough, joy, business strength, business growth, and deeper creative growth. And then lastly is the X factor. So this is like, what are some things that I have that maybe others don't have that are in a similar realm as me? So I'm cross-disciplinary. Like I have a lot of talents in a lot of different realms, and I'm able to kind of weave them together. And that's something that I just don't really see very much. Polymath, which is just kind of another way of saying the same thing, that I just have a lot of talents. Multipotentialite, again, same thing. Hybrid, practical, real, open, authentic, confident. Practical alchemy, philosophical, experimental, wizard for hire, and experiential. So this whole process of like getting all these attributes really should just take you, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops if you keep to the timer. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is set your timer for 2 minutes, and then we're going to go through and do this kind of the same thing, but instead of writing new stuff, we're just going to pick the top 3 to 5, right? That's it. Super easy. So here we are with our list, And my top, ones that resonated in culture was creator culture, soulful, transformative, healing, and deep work. Then in audience was conscious, powerful creators, creative, artful, visionary doers. I think that was 6, but yeah, whatever. Voice. My voice, I would like to be more soulful, philosophical, deep, confident, and thoughtful. Feeling is empowered, calm, connected, grounded, enlightened. The impact. Transformation, unlocked potential, dream life, breakthrough, and deeper creative growth. And then finally for X Factor, my top 5 was multi-potentialite, real, authentic, practical alchemy, and philosophical. Okay, so one more pass. And now instead of first round was 3 minutes, second round is 2 minutes, third round is 1 minute. So all you have to do now is just pick the top one in each column with 1 minute each. Super easy. All right, so culture, my number 1 is transformative. Audience, my number 1, the type of people that I want to be working with, the type of people that I hope are showing up to here and that are here now are powerful creators. That's the one that just, yes, that's my people. That's who I want to do this with. Voice, soulful. I would like to, when I communicate as a common thread or theme, like I would like my communications to feel soulful. Doesn't mean it always has to be like that. It's just, it gives me something to anchor to, which is so important, especially, so many of us, build our businesses and brands, not really putting any thought into this stuff and really understand, we put so much thought into the thing that we're making, but we don't really put any thought into how we present or communicate that thing. And this system can help change that for you. So feeling, how do I want others to feel? I want them to feel grounded. This was actually a surprise to me. And again, I want to just point out the power of having somebody else help you with this is that other people will help you see things about yourself that you aren't able to see. I would have never even had chosen the word grounded at all for this. This was, someone else in the group said that because they felt that way from hearing me speak, right? Kind of interesting. So grounded. Yeah. Okay, next up, the impact. Like what is my number 1 biggest point of impact that I feel like I have on others is deeper creative growth. And then finally, the X factor. Let's see if you can imagine what one I picked. Practical alchemy. Out of all of these ones, no one else is doing what I'm doing with the alchemy stuff, right? Just bajillions of people that are teaching creative development and, brand development, personal development, all these things. But I don't really see it happening through this lens. So that's an X factor for me. So there we go. So this kind of gives a bit of a map for our identity. And these are basically seeds of creativity that we are then going to turn into images and identity and all the different things later. So we can weave all this together into an instant brand statement. And here's the brand statement. So it's kind of like remember those Mad Lib things? So you just fill in the blanks basically with your top ones. So, name, who you are, provides, whatever it is that you do, your craft, your product, your service. And then who's your audience, in a culture, whatever your culture is, environment with a blank voice, helping them to feel whatever your feeling is. And then also to have this, whatever this impact is. And then the X factor here tacked on at the end. So a lot of times what I'll do is kind of tweak some of the language just to make it flow. And sometimes I'll even weave in the X factor rather than just tacking it in at the end here. But I'll show you how this looks by filling it out. So with just a few little tweaks, here's the whole thing. So Andy Freeland provides brand strategy and experience design for powerful creators in a transformative environment with a soulful voice, helping them be grounded and break through to deeper creativity. And I use this X factor of practical alchemy. I mean, I would like to know, like, just looking at this statement, like, does this feel true to you in context of like what I'm doing here on this call and with Brand Alchemy and stuff? I mean, it feels true to me. So then kind of distilling it further and just weaving it all together, everything that we've talked about here so far, basically my brand essence can be summed up as this, right? Andy Freeland provides experiences and educate. Oh, I actually tweaked this slightly. So instead of brand strategy and experience design, which is kind of more of a client-centric way of saying it, I tweaked it to say Andy Freeland provides experiences and education for powerful creators in a transformative environment with a soulful voice, helping them be grounded and break through to deeper creativity. My X factor is practical alchemy, and my archetypes are the alchemist, explorer, revolutionary. And like I said before, let's change that to philosopher. Well, let's go. We'll just keep it as is. All right. So what this is, what I have here is the essence. It is the essence category or segment of the seed. So here we are. The essence. We have the archetype and the attribute, and how that fits here, right? So this is the seed. So again, last week we did vision. Now this week is all about essence, which has those two parts of the attributes and the archetypes. So the next steps, what I would like you to do, and is to figure out what your archetypes are, right? So just can feel into it. You'll be able to watch the recording here, and I'll also be writing more about it throughout the week as well, and providing lots of resources and things like that that'll help you. So choose your archetypes, a primary and a secondary, or two secondaries if you need to, but this simpler the better. And then to do the attributes exercise and then create your brand statement. And by doing those three things, you will have completed your essence. And I promise you that if you do this, it's really gonna be clarifying, to say the least. I mean, this I felt like gave me so much clarity and direction, and just it really helps me to know thyself. So if you see the value in doing that, I highly recommend doing the exercises. So and then let's see. All right, so recap. What did we learn today? So we learned that the essence of a brand, right, which is to say, what makes your brand you, or what makes you and unique, is a combination of these archetypes and attributes. Or really, these are just tools to help you get more clear, right? So where do we go next? Well, next week, what we're going to be focusing on is audience. And then, as you can imagine, the next week after that, we will be going to priorities, and then we'll have completed the seed, and then we'll move on to the next phase. So this is all just this is a sequence, a process. This is basically like, an ongoing online course that I'm just live streaming for free. So here's the cycle. Which will be finishing the seed in January, and then February. Basically, each month is another one of these processes. So February will be root, March will be the flower, and then April will be fruit. So that is it for today's presentation. If anybody has any questions about any of this, now's the time to ask. I'm totally down to dig in with you guys and answer questions and clarify anything that needs to be clarified. And then while we wait for questions to come in, I would like to talk about the collab. So this is a weekly mastermind. This is basically a community of powerful creators that I've put together, of people that are all kind of like hearts and minds, that are all building brands and businesses and, you know, growing their craft. And we do a weekly mastermind where we get together and we do this work together. We actually apply, you know, what I'm talking about and teaching in these classes, and we actually apply it in a group setting. And we're all growing our things together. So we do group coaching, and it's just an amazing group. And if this is something that if you feel that might be interested in, then reach out to me at my email here, andy@opulentcreative.com. It's by application only, and I haven't set up like an application system or form yet. So if you're interested, just like hit me up and introduce yourself, and we'll have a chat and see if it's a good fit. So, all right, let's do a Q&A. So Daniel says, hello Daniel, by the way. Daniel's one of the collaborators in the collab. The exercise so the brand attributes exercise seems so powerful to get the vision that I was struggling with. Is it okay? Is it okay to move on to this to get more inspiration? I'm not totally sure what you mean, Daniel. Could you maybe re-ask the question a little slightly different way? But yeah, Daniel says earlier, it says, great system. I can see how this adds so many more dimensions to a brand. You are absolutely correct. That's exactly what this does. Is it both the archetypes and the attributes? It's just like a way to manage meaning. It's a way to draw lots and lots of depth of meaning in a logical system that people are going to naturally resonate with because it's based on human psychology, right? Anthony says, dope, dude. You've put a lot of work into this, and I super appreciate you for that. Respect. I super appreciate you, Anthony. I'm just checking the comments, making sure there's no comments that slip through or questions. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then I'm just going to wrap things up. Thank you guys so much for joining me again for this week's episode. I know there was a little bit of tech glitches in the beginning. I did my first stream, like, somehow crashed midway through, and then my second redo, my computer just like totally shut down. So Daniel says, I was struggling with getting my vision like super dialed in. So I'd like to move on to this attribute exercise and then go back to vision after that. Yes, you can totally do that. We don't need to try to like get things perfect. You know what I mean? Like, it's a cycle, right? Like, this idea that you're going to like create your brand and you create your logo and then you're done is, you're not done. Like, you're never done. Brand is never done, because a brand is a reputation. It's like, not like you set your reputation and then you're done. Because if you do that, then your reputation is going to like go away, or, it's going to change. So, we're constantly perfecting, constantly refining, right? So what you're going to find, Daniel, is that by doing the exercises of the attributes, right? Doing the attributes, and then also like figuring out your archetype, like, right? You see each of these archetypes have this whole set of ideas and philosophies and meanings and values and these things, right? These are just all these layers and the bits of meaning to pull from. So if you figure out what your archetype is and you figure out your attributes, you're probably going to learn a lot about your vision through that process. that's kind of how this whole thing works. You know, as you move forward, you'll continue to learn more, and you'll go back and you refine things, and it's a constant work in progress. So I hope that helps. All right, you guys, thank you so much. We'll be back next week at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be continuing with that schedule for the foreseeable future. Thank you so much. I'll be launching my website in the next couple weeks, and I'll also be launching the podcast version of this live stream as well probably in the next week or so. So that's coming for all you guys that prefer or like to listen to podcasts. All right. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'm here for you. And yeah, thank you so much. Cheers.